Hi everybody, I see we have 2 attendees so far who have joined. Mpo and Marsha, you are both very welcome. I'm going to unmute you for now. Then you'll be able to unmute yourselves and chat with me. It's going to be a very interesting session if there are just 3 of us, but I suppose 3 is better than 0. Welcome to Borgu. We're glad to have you in the session. I'm going to give a bit of time to allow students who are perhaps struggling to connect so that they can join and not miss any of the important information. But what is important is that I will be posting the recording of tonight's session on the module site, and I will also be posting the PowerPoint presentation onto the module site. So if for some other reason you get cut off, don't fear, the recording will be made available. If you do lose sound sometime during the presentation, because sometimes the sound fluctuates, just leave and return, and then your sound usually restores itself. Can I have a show of hands that you can hear me, because it's very quiet on the other side? Mtabi Singh, welcome. Thanks, Mpo. Thanks, Marsha. Thanks to Borgu. Mtabi Singh, can you hear me? Okay, these students that have given me their hands raised, you can lower your hand. Can I just ask that everybody mute their mics, please? We're having somebody's mic feeding through. Welcome, Teresa. Mrs. van der Kerk, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Prof. Benson.
Teresa, when I'm presenting, I'm just going to ask that you keep an eye on the presentation for me. If something goes wrong or the presentation gets stuck, you can just stop me midway. You can just interrupt me and tell me you've lost sound or your presentation is stuck, so that I don't lose students. And then if there are challenges that students are facing, that we can just ask that you will just assist them sort out challenges.
Okay, I'll do so.
Thanks, Teresa. Mtabi Singh, I see your hand, so I assume that you can hear me. Okay, everybody, we're at 4 minutes past 6. I'm just going to ask Teresa, which screen are you seeing? Are you seeing the live class study unit 1, or are you seeing my PowerPoint presentation?
I'm seeing the live class. I'm seeing all the
participants.
The participants, yes.
Okay.
I don't know what to do to get it.
Okay.
There you are. I see FOR2608 study unit 1.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, then I'm going to start. Thank you everybody for honoring the time. and for putting aside the time so that we can have this live session. Mrs. van der Kerk is going to be my eyes and ears, because while presenting, I cannot see your hands. I will not know if you're having challenges or problems. I just want to reiterate again, if you are experiencing a sound challenge and the sound goes off, sometimes what helps is if you leave the meeting and you just come back in. Please let's just all make sure that our mics are muted and that you keep your video off, because the video, if we do a live feed, that chows our data, so we don't work with a live video feed. So without further ado, welcome to our very first live session for FOR2608 for the forensic investigation degree. It is information gathering, and the study unit we will be doing tonight is investigative interviewing, study unit 1. So my camera is off so that I'm saving your data. I'm going to ask that we keep our questions right until the end. Unless there's a burning issue, then you can post your question and Mrs. van der Kerk will ask me to pause, and then we can stop and discuss something, but only if it's pertinent. I'd like to finish the entire study unit before we do the Q&A session. I want to remind you that the PowerPoint presentation will be added to your module site. And so if there are some of your fellow students who can't make it, or if something happens and load shedding hits or whatever the case might be, you can go and download the PowerPoint presentation as well as the recording. I will put the link on the site. I just want to answer the student quickly. I see we have a student that's struggling to join. I just want to see if I can help him on Telegram quickly. If you will all just bear with me. Okay, so let me introduce myself. This is who I am. I'm Bernadine Benson. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Police Practice. And before I became an academic, I worked in the South African Police Services from 1988 until 2007, when I resigned at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. And during this time, I had various tenures. I worked in basic training. I went through all the different disciplines in basic training. And I worked as a street police official. I worked at the Flying Squad, the Pretoria Flying Squad, and then I ended up as a detective at the Endangered Species Protection Unit. I joined UNISA in 2007 in March, where I've been to date. I have attained my BTEC in policing, which I attained cum laude, and my MTEC in policing, which I also obtained cum laude. And then I obtained my DLIT et Fil, or my doctorate degree in police science. My area of speciality is art crime. So I am responsible presently for 3 modules. FOR1502, so some of you would have gone through my hands last year. FOR2608, this is what we're dealing with. And if you decide to do your master's, and you do the coursework masters, you will then find me as the lecturer for FOR5907. Teaching is not my only job. I also do postgraduate supervision. I have currently 12 master students and 2 PhD students. I'm very happily married. You will see on the left-hand side, there's a nice picture of my family. We do the off-road bush and sea holidays. We go where there's no people. On the very left is my husband, Marco, is also an ex-police official. The tiny one there is me. And then just to the right of him is Bradley. That's my son. He is 20. And the little girl in front there is Michaela, and she is 17 years old. So that is my family. So from here on in, please no longer address me as Sir or Mr. Benson. I am very much a female, so please use that. Sorry, I just need to address the student again. Let's hope the student is sorted. Teresa, you still seeing the slide?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so before we get to where we're going, there's a lot of students that have joined us late, and I'm hoping that some of them are here tonight. So let us just recap. This year has been, well, the past 2 years have really turned itself on the head with COVID hitting us, us going fully online. So this year we felt the first repercussions of COVID of last year. So what happened last year is the matric results came out late. And as a result of the matric results only coming out in March, UNISA had to push aside or push ahead with their registration date. So where registration was usually January, February, registration ran up to March. And looking at the year and looking at tuition, the university made the decision to collapse the 2 semesters into one. So you might have registered for FOR2608 for semester 2, but you are being run concurrently. So they put the 2 semesters over each other and they're running them together in one, what we call a super semester. Now in the super semester, there are 3 primary role players. There's the student, there's the lecturer, and there's the administration section. The student is you, and you are responsible for your learning, and you are responsible for your administrative stuff. The lecturer, that's me, I am responsible for your tuition. I'm responsible to make sure that I give you the tools to enable you to be able to engage with the learning material. I give you feedback on assignments, and I help you if there are issues in terms of tuition. Guys, I cannot help with registration matters. I cannot help with finance matters. I cannot help cancelling modules. I don't have access to those sites. That's where the administration department comes in. On your module sites, or just before you go into your module sites on My UNISA, there's an admin tab. You will find all the information you need on the admin tab. A very important aspect to remember is your module site. We're going to be talking about the primary purpose of the module site. I want to also touch on the assignment due date, because if you haven't been keeping abreast, you're going to be very confused about the assignment due dates. Sometimes I must also just take a moment, take a deep breath and say, okay, which module am I busy with? And because I've given some of you incorrect information, because I'm getting confused as well. So if your lecture is getting confused, you are forgiven for being confused, but after tonight, there should be no more confusion. In terms of tutorial letters, there are 2 very important tutorial letters, 101 and 001. We will talk about them a little bit later. I want to chat with you a little bit about communicating with the university and your lecturer, and then I want to encourage you. While FOR2608 is a second year module, some of you might be finding it difficult to find your way in the online space. There is an initiative at UNISA, it's called the First Year Experience. I really want you to encourage you to join the First Year Experience. It's basically a process where they take you through UNISA, they familiarize you with the module sites, how assessment works, and all the other good stuff so that you can find your feet in terms of the module. And it seems like my presentation is now getting stuck and it doesn't want to move. Okay, are we all on email communication? So I get these funny emails. Dear Professor, I'm doing follow-up to inquire about assignment 1 and why it's not showing on my UNISA. So please, when you write to me, in the subject line here, it's important here in the subject line that you give me your student name and number, you give me the module code, and you give me the basis of your inquiry. In other words, access to the module site or whatever the case might be, so that I can immediately situate your inquiry. I know it's FR1501 or FR2608 or FR5907. Then you write your little message and you send regards. That's basic 101 on email communication. And then sometimes I get these emails from a gmail.com, and then after about a week I get a complaint to say, but you haven't answered my email, only to find that your email is lying in my junk folder because the server doesn't recognize a Gmail address. So it's important, use your MyLife email address, because then the server can recognize it and it goes into my inbox. So this student, unfortunately, wrote the entire message, and the message is written in the subject line. I cannot make out. I can see it's something about FR1502, but that's all I can make.
Prof. Benson, there's no sound.
To help the student.
There's it. Your sound is going on and off.
Is my sound going on and off? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. And here is the last example. There is nothing in the subject line. Morning. Please assist me. I'm struggling to find JRoot on my UNISA to submit my assignment. How am I supposed to help you? Guys, I can only help you if you give me information. So you give me your student number, give me the module code, and tell me more or less what it's about, because then I can situate you. Otherwise, I'm going to send an email back and say, can't help you. Use your MyLife account, tell me what module, and tell me what your inquiry is. So our assessments for this year, as I said earlier, this year has been turned on its head thanks to COVID. Assignment 1 initially was due on the 1st of April. Due to several factors, UNISA management have now decided that assignment 1 due date is 7 June. I have updated this on the system. So assignment 1, which is a fully online assignment, multiple choice, 20 marks. The due date is 7 June, I beg your pardon, 7 June. And you have until midnight, 5 minutes to midnight on the 7th of June to submit that. I cannot open the system once it's closed. So you have more than enough time. Please remember it's MCQ. It's open book, so you can use your study guide. It is randomized, so you and your friend can sit next to each other, but you will not get the same questions. You will not even get the same options. If you do get the same questions, and you have 2 opportunities to do this assignment, it counts 20 marks. When you log on, you have to complete it. You cannot go through and make screenshot, and thinking you're going to go back and do your choices. The system will take it as a submission and do an automatic submission. As I said, you have 2 opportunities. The computer will calculate the highest mark, and that is what will be used for assignment 1. Assignment 2 is a crossword puzzle. Here I have really forced you to work through the entire study guide, and the due date is the 19th of June. Assignment 3 is a written assignment. It counts 50 marks, and the due date is the 10th of June. So please mark those due dates and mark the marks. Your examination counts 100 marks. It will be an on-timetable exam. In other words, you will get an exam timetable, and this exam will be on that timetable. There will be a specific date. It is going to be a portfolio of evidence. In other words, you are going to get questions that you will have to go and answer. It's fully open book, and you will have 48 hours to answer the portfolio questions. It's application and insight, not recall. In other words, it's not list, name. No, it's read the case study and apply. Read the case study and apply. Very important that you realize that. Okay, so information gathering has 5 primary units, 1 through 5, and as you will see out of all of those topics, it's all about gathering information in terms of your the work that you are doing. So resources for FOR2608, what are your resources? Well, fortunately, there's no prescribed book. We do have one study guide. The study guide is available on the module site under additional resources and official study material. There are 2 tutorial letters. Now, the most important tutorial letter is tutorial letter 001. You will find this under announcements on the module site. I spoke briefly about students being registered for semester 1 and semester 2. Everybody, whether you are semester 1 or semester 2, everybody does the same assignments. You do no other assignments except for the assignments you find in tutorial letter 001. That is the only assignments you do. Any other assignments, I'm going to return it to you and it will be unmarked. I can help you until the due date. After the due date, I can do nothing. So please make sure that you are aware of your due dates. Somebody's mic is on. Can I just ask you to mute your mic, please? And then the second tutorial letter, which is also important, is tutorial letter 101. This is all the background information in terms of this specific module. Everything in this tutorial letter is relevant except for the assessment. So you will then disregard the assessment questions in tutorial letter 101 and only use the assessment questions in tutorial letter 001. Teresa, can you just double check somebody's mic is on?
Okay, I'll do. I'll quickly see if I can find out.
Thank you.
Okay. It's Mr. Guafa. I'm guessing it's a Mr. Gufuane. Okay, now it's off.
Okay, thanks so much.
I'm just checking if yeah, that's the only thing I can see.
Okay, so there is a module site, guys. Now, in UNISA space, the module site is where I share information. The Telegram group is just a backup. The primary place where I share information with you is on the module site. All the good stuff is there. All the tips will be there. All the clues will be there. So if you want answers to questions, you go to the module site. This is where the information about this module is kept. So I want to just quickly for a moment, just stand still and just reflect on the skills of a detective. The majority of you have done FOR1502. In that module, we spoke about the different skills that a detective has. A detective is somebody who inquires, who searches, who goes and he scratches and he looks for information. A detective doesn't pop up on the Telegram group and say, hey guys, where's the clue for question 3 of assignment 3? Hey guys, where do I find the study guide? No, man. A good detective goes and looks. If you are FOR2608, this is your second year, you know about the module site. Please, let's not be lazy. Let's do our own homework. Let's do our own work. That's how we empower ourselves, and then we can help others. One Telegram group, we don't give each other the answers. That's not what the Telegram group is there. The Telegram group is to create a community spirit where we encourage each other. We ask questions and say, I don't understand this question. How do I unpack the question? Not what is the answer or give me a clue. Guys, that's not how it works. You are the student. You are responsible for your own learning. You've got to go and read your study guide. You have one lecturer. That's me. It doesn't help you write to another lecturer and say, listen, this woman is crazy. She's not giving me the answers. Help me. Another lecturer is simply not going to help you. I am the one that you come to if there's something in terms of tuition you don't understand. And then last but not least, you have 1,215 fellow students who you can ask for help, not answers, for help. So this is now the foundation of where we are going tonight. In terms of the study guide, you will see at the beginning of each study unit, there are learning objectives. In other words, what is an objective? An objective is that which you want to achieve. So what are the objectives of study unit 1? The objectives are, you must understand the concepts of interviewing and interrogation. You must be able to explain the differences between these two concepts. You must be able to apply interviewing and interrogation techniques in a basic investigation. You should be able to spot possible deception in a witness or a suspect. And you must be able to apply basic statement analysis. Now, I'm honestly hoping that the majority of you are not going to be thrown into the deep end and be expected to do interviews or statement analysis on your own unsupervised for the first time. I honestly hope that your company will put you under some sort of mentorship program in which you learn by an old hand, because interviewing and interrogation takes years and years of practice. And it's important that you first learn under a mentor before they allow you to fly solo. So let's take a look at what information gathering and investigation is not about. You've all seen these shows, CSI, Mindhunter, Rizzolian Isles, and I can go on and name and name and name. This is not a true reflection of crime investigation or even information gathering. This is Hollywood style. You don't just pitch up at a crime scene and the fingerprint is there. You actually have to do back-breaking work. So if this is what you were expecting, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, ain't gonna happen. The investigation of crimes or incidents that you are registered for, our qualification is specifically aimed at corporate investigators. So you have to ask yourself, what is the goal of every investigation? Each and every investigation has one specific purpose. It's to search for and find the truth. There are specific objectives in an investigation, one of which is to gather information relating to the crime or an incident. So you will have learned in FOR2608 that it's not always a criminal offense. It could sometimes be a policy transgression, like absenteeism. And this does not necessarily lead to an arrest or an action. So in other words, you might do the investigation, the boss might just decide to warn the person verbally. Very seldom does a corporate investigator arrest people, but it does sometimes happen. And once again, I really hope that you are put under a mentorship before you are exposed to this, the field. So you have to investigate within the mandate of your company. You may not go outside this. This is if you're a corporate investigator, even if you're a private investigator. In the SAPs are bound by very strict rules and regulations, but they have far-reaching powers. In other words, they have powers of search and seizure and arrest and detain, etc. Whereas you do not have those powers. But whatever you do, whatever action you take, your actions have to be legal and ethically sound. So where do you begin? If you want to hit the bull's eye, there is only one place to start, and that is with the people involved in the incident. It's either the complainant or the victim. Sometimes they are witnesses, other times they are not, but they are always suspects. And how are you going to get information from these people? You are going to talk to them. You are going to interview them, or you are going to interrogate them. Because at the end of the day, it's only by talking to people, getting information from them, that you can hit where you are aiming at in terms of finding the truth about what happened. And in order to do this, you have to develop the skills of effective interviewing. This is one of the most important skills that every investigator needs to develop. Even when we do research, as researchers, when we go out into the field and we interview people, we do a pilot. In other words, we do a dry run. We test our interview schedule. As an investigator, you're going to have to test how you're going to handle yourself in an interviewing situation. Because at the end of the day, when your evidence has to stand up in court, that is the litmus test. In other words, how your evidence is obtained influences its admissibility. This is covered in Section 35 of the Constitution. You can go and read up on your own. We will not be covering it in this presentation, so please go and read up on that. And in order to do effective interviewing, we use what we call investigative interviewing. So this is interviewing in an investigative context. This is made up of two sides of the same coin, can I almost say, two different but related processes. The first process is the one on the right, information gathering or interviewing. And it's important that you take note of the difference between the two, but also the similarity between the two. In order to get information, we need to ask people. This is now before we go to the scene. Because how will you know what happened if you don't talk to the people who are involved? So you have to talk to either the victim, the witness, and the perpetrator. And this usually happens through a normal conversation, and it's highly structured. In other words, there's a specific process that you must follow. It's like baking a cake. If you skip a step, your cake is going to flop. On the other side of the coin, you will quickly realize when somebody is no longer a witness, but it becomes clear that this person is a perpetrator. You will then interrogate this person. It won't be an interviewing going into an interrogation. You interview and you finish the process. We will talk about the steps just now, but you finish the process because you are busy gathering information to take you forward. It's incredibly difficult to teach you a practical skill online. So what we try and give you is we try and give you steps or principles that you apply. And then when you apply these things, then the process can flow. Now, similarly, interrogation on the left-hand side is this is where you want the person to either admit to certain things or to confess or to prove their innocence by telling you what indeed happened, because they might be an accomplice and might have been drawn into it, but then they can tell you what happened and admit to part or admit to nothing and be able to prove their innocence. You will only interrogate if you're convinced of the person's involvement as a perpetrator. And I just want to note a caveat here. I spoke to one of my ex-police colleagues who is a private detective. He's got his own firm, and he told me that very seldom do they interrogate these days. They actually just do a confrontational interview. So go and read up on confrontational interviews. This is basically where you confront the person who you suspect is the suspect with facts, but only after you've done information gathering. Once again, it's a highly structured process, and it is incredibly important that you inform the person of their rights before you start with the accusations or the confrontation. This person may refuse to talk to you. In actual fact, if you go in too aggressively, they will refuse to talk to you. But if you do it in a professional and confident and non-attacking way, very often they do talk to you and they make certain admissions to you. So let's consider the structure of interviewing or interrogation. These two disciplines have the same structure, exactly the same structure. They follow these three elements you will find in terms of both interviewing and interrogation. So they overlap. The first and possibly the most important is preparation. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Guys, I cannot emphasize this enough. Let me take the example of a Comrades athlete. You don't just pitch up for Comrades on a Sunday morning and now you run from Pietermaritzburg to Durban. No, it takes months and months and months of preparation. The same with interviewing or interrogation. You have to prepare for the interview with a witness or the victim, because it's so important that you get your ducks in a row. You address the person by the name, you establish rapport. We will talk a little bit about rapport just now. You will establish rapport, and then the process, the sequential steps in terms of either interviewing or interrogation, you will follow those steps. And then possibly also one of the most important factors is location. Now you will hear that they talk about in buying and selling of houses. They say location, location, location. Well, exactly the same with interviewing and interrogation. Location is vitally, vitally important, because you can decide to either go to the person's office and do the interview in that person's office. That person has the upper hand in their office because it's a familiar location. They feel familiar there. They have their stuff around them. Or you take them out of their comfort zone and you rock their boat a little bit. And that usually sets a good tone. The atmosphere is incredibly important. You have to establish an atmosphere of cooperation. You have to be professional and you have to be friendly. And when you do this, it's so important. It's so important that you do note-taking and that you have established rapport. I cannot overemphasize rapport enough. It's incredibly important before you go headlong into an interview that rapport is established. So how does one establish rapport? Before you do any interview, any conversation, any discussion, you must establish rapport. You must make a connection with a person. You talk to the person about a safe topic. You can talk to them about soccer, or you can talk to them about the weather, or you can talk to them about the state of the economy, something that is unrelated to the case. Because while you are talking to the person, you are setting the person at ease. You've invited the person in for an interview. You've invited the person in. Just remember that an interview is an unfamiliar process. It's an unfamiliar setting for some people, and it's only natural that they're going to be tentative and a little bit nervous in the beginning. So you establish rapport by having a cliched conversation. You talk about kittens and puppies and all sorts of stuff, just to set the person at ease. You are professional and you are friendly, and you see what the person's baseline is. You see what their normal behavior is. And then you will start your interviewing process. And during the interview, these 5 things are incredibly important. But now you must also remember we're in the middle of COVID. So things like masks come into play. Things like social distancing comes into play, and things like sanitizing come into play. So what you can do is you're going to have to, if you face the interviewer, make sure that there is sufficient social distancing between you and the person. Make eye contact, have that eye contact with the person that you are interviewing. Don't stare them down, that's not what it's about. But make the eye contact, be personal, but also be sensitive about cultural issues. In some culture, some people will not look you in the eye, especially if you have a male-female position. There's an unnatural hierarchy there. So these are the little things that you must also take into consideration. Address the person by name. Mary or Nkateku or Mpo. Use the person's name in your conversation and have that personal space, but don't be in the person's face. Remember COVID, and then reflect back in terms of positive head nodding and mirroring the person's, how can I say, their body language. And this is what you do throughout your interview. Now, at the heart of investigation is effective communication. We can communicate. I mean, I've been married to my husband for 22 years. Sometimes we communicate past each other, and we've been communicating for 22 years. So if people can miscommunicate, who know each other for so long, how much more people who don't know each other very well? So your communication is when there's interaction with people, you have to have effective communication. And in the context of we're talking about interpersonal communication between two or more people in a face-to-face situation. Sometimes it will be you and a colleague with a person that you are interviewing. That's always the best option. And sometimes it'll just be you and the other person. And while you are communicating, you are creating a reality. You are creating an us reality, you and I. You and I are in this conversation together. And the message that you are communicating is so important. And therefore, if you really are serious about a career as an investigator, you have to develop and hone your communication skills. And I don't need to tell you that in terms of South African context, miscommunication among the races is even greater. So if you are cross-culturally communicating, we have to be so sensitive and so aware of where we might miss things, where we might interpret things. So let's take a look at the normal communication development path. When you communicate, communication normally scaffolds from just superficial communication up to a deep and a personal and intimate level of communication. Now that fifth level, as an investigator, you do not go there with your interviewee. You will do step 1 to 4, and then that is it. So let's go through these steps first. Put yourself in the position at a pub or a restaurant or wherever you go to just chill, and you meet somebody interesting. You usually start talking about the weather, and then you start talking about more solid things, and then you start asking each other about what's your opinion on this, what's your opinion on that. And you don't just in one night jump to personal and intimate, you know, this is my deepest, darkest secrets. No, you don't do that. It's something that develops over time. And it's something that you have to establish a basis of trust to get to the feelings section. Remember, we don't go to step 5, we get to the feelings section. So you start off with cliched conversation, something non-threatening, something safe. And here you establish, okay, this is how this person talks with their hands. I mean, if you had to see me now, I'm waving my hands all over the place. I talk with my hands. I'm a very vivid speaker. I speak with my hands. If I have to sit on my hands, I can't talk, because then basically my mouth is closed. So I use my hands when I talk. So now you can see, okay, this person uses their hands, they use their facial expressions, they laugh. Every now and then when my hair gets in my eyes, I will flick it out of my eyes. I scratch my ears sometime. I put my left leg over my right leg. Now you can see the person's normal behavior. Then as the communication develops, you start asking about facts. You only initiate the step once there's an acceptable foundation. So now you tell to the person, okay, tell me what happened. Who was there when you got to the office on Monday morning? Can you remember what time it was? Do you recall if John was behind his desk? Can you recall if John had a green jacket on? So then you ask factual things, and it's okay if they don't know, if they can't remember, we will get back to them. Once you've established the facts about what they know, what they personally saw or personally heard, because we do not go on hearsay information. If they give you hearsay information, you make a note because you can go and double check it. Once you've gone past the facts, then you start asking about them, you know, share your ideas. Why do you think she stole the laptop? Or do you think this was the first time she stole a laptop? Do you think she had problems with her previous work? So that type of thing. You never give your judgment or your opinion. You always ask the person to give their opinion. It's important to also realize that their opinion is not necessarily fact. There's a difference between fact and story. Their opinion is also setting them at ease that you value their inputs. Once you get past this, you get to a place where the interview might express feelings and say, yes, you know what, I never liked the way that man looked at me, or I was always uncomfortable when I went into his office. The person might start crying. The person might start getting aggressive because I told management this man was harassing me, but nobody wanted to believe me. Don't get sucked in. Be empathetic, but don't be sympathetic. Keep your professional distance. And if you're in an interrogation setup, sometimes this is where the person comes out and says, you know what, and that's the reason I scratched his car. Or because they're trying to justify why it is what they did. And in an interrogation, you're going to help them. You're going to build a bridge for them so that they can go the direction you want them to go. Although it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. And then the fifth space, or the fifth step, personal intimate. This is a taboo space in terms of communication. In our space, you don't go there. So what are the communication barriers? So when my husband and I chat, one thing I've realized when he comes into my office and he wants to talk to me about something and I am working, I have to ask him, hold a moment, I have to finish my thought, I have to press send, then I have to give him my undivided attention. Because whether we like it or not, multitasking is not good. It doesn't help you do 10 things poorly. Rather do one thing at a time very well. So let's take a look at two communication barriers. There's defensive listening and there is external barriers. Now, what happens with defensive listening? Defensive listening usually happens when the investigator hasn't made the effort to establish rapport, makes absolutely no effort to establish eye contact, because you know what? I've made up my mind. I know what happened. And irrespective of what the evidence says, everything outside my, what I've decided, my hypothesis for this situation, that doesn't matter. I've made up my mind. You are guilty, and I will force these facts into proving that you are guilty. Some of them are impatient, and some of them are simply dismissive because, you know what? Who are you? You're just a secretary. What do you know? I'm talking to you now because I have to talk to you just to check the box. But meanwhile, if I ask you the right questions, you are going to give me the answers I need, because very seldom do people offer information. Very seldom. You have to ask the right questions. Internal, external barriers. Let's talk about external barriers. Remember, we spoke about the location of the interviews or the interrogation, and this is where the external barriers comes in. The place of interaction, there where you're sitting chatting, is not private. Too many people are present. There's noise, distractions, phones, an untidy office. Now, personally, I will not do an interview in my office. My office is incredibly untidy because I'm a right-brained person. I will literally tidy up my desk now, and 20 minutes later, it will look like there's been an explosion. So you have to make sure where you interview people is free of distraction. Empty table, 2 chairs, that's it. That's it. So I want to chat with you quickly about some principles of effective communication. This is not in the study guide. You will not be tested on this. This is just additional information, just to give you additional things to think about when you communicate. So the first principle is seek to understand before you seek to be understood. If you have this attitude, your modus operandi will be to listen. Now, oftentimes when we listen, check people. When you're talking to them, are they listening to you to hear what you are saying? Even check yourself, monitor yourself. Sometimes when I'm having a conversation, I am listening with the idea of I'm preparing a response. I'm not listening to understand. I can only fully respond to you if I understand where you are coming from and if I understand the message that you are giving me. Don't be afraid of silence. When there's a bit of silence, don't be afraid of silence. We can only impart the information once we've collected it. So I can only write in my investigative report that which I've collected. Cannot suck it out of my thumb, and it doesn't come from thin air. I have to get it from somebody. The next aspect is be non-judgmental. You have to listen empathetically. And here I want to give you some advice. EQ is what you call emotional intelligence. Now, fortunately, this is a skill or a characteristic that you as an investigator can develop. If you go and read on Daniel Goleman and EQ, there's many books out there that will explain to you tools and skills development that you can do to actually enhance your emotional intelligence. And the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more acutely aware you are of what's going on around you. Have you ever wondered why children don't talk to their parents about drugs or sex? Because they know what their parents' views are. And instead, unless they want to have an argument, they very seldom will have a conversation because the judgment has already been made. So in a situation where you are communicating with a witness or whoever, you reserve judgment. You do not judge. You do not give your view. You do not give your opinion. You do, however, give your undivided attention to the speaker. Have you ever wondered why you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth? Well, I think it's because the good Lord wanted us to speak twice as less as we would hear. So in other words, we must listen twice as often than we speak. It's important that you give your undivided attention to the speaker. The next time you go to a restaurant and you sit and you wait for your drinks or whatever the case might be, look at the people around you. I was amazed very recently. My husband and I went for dinner and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 couples around us. And how many of these couples were busy on their phones? It was awful. How do you feel when you're speaking to somebody and you have this phone ping, ping, pinging, and this person is constantly checking on their phone? That is probably one of the rudest things that you can do. It's akin to interrupting and speaking to a third person who isn't even there. And this is where I want to tell you something very controversial. Beware of eye contact. Sometimes less is more. We have to be culturally sensitive because in some cultures, people will stare you down to show their dominance. So be careful of that staring competition we used to have with kids. Now's not the time for this. Now is the time to give the person your undivided attention, and even if it means looking down every now and then, making notes, looking at the person in the face, blinking your eyes, nodding your head. It's important that this person doesn't feel that you physically staring them down. And then use silence effectively. Always let the moment develop. Sometimes you will hear me in the class while I'm talking is I will take a moment and I'm actually having some coffee and I'm gathering my thoughts. Don't interrupt the person. Don't try and fill the space with something. Silence is more often more painful for the speaker than it is for the listener. Because the speaker sometimes feels, oh, I've got to say something, I've got to say something. Be quiet, be calm, and let the speaker speak when they're ready. We use our body language, we use eye contact, we use non-verbal sounds like or yes, oh really, but also be careful of snorting or laughing or what? That type of thing when you are interviewing somebody. So you have to keep yourself in check. You have to make sure that you are reserved without being aloof. And this, this takes practice, guys. So have you heard of hearsay evidence? Did you hear what Sally said? Did you hear what the MD did at the office party the weekend? Now, in terms of evidence, hearsay evidence is not permitted in a court of law because it is tainted. It is third-party evidence. Now, as children, we used to play that little game telephone, where you sit in a row and the first person whispers something in the next person's ear, and the next person, and the next person, next person. And here by 5, when the person says, okay, this is the message, 99% of the times, the message that comes out is not the same message that's given. And that's why hearsay evidence isn't used. We always want the pure version. In other words, if you want to know what Sally said, you ask Sally, Sally, what did you say? And here comes the beauty of everything. When we speak every day,
Prof. Benson, there's one person who can't hear.
Okay, Teresa, for the people that can't hear, try and leave, and then you come back in again. That usually helps with the audio.
Okay, I'll type a message like that as well.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. So in terms of the interpersonal communication, all our communication consists of 3 elements. 7% is our words. Only 7% is the words we use. 38% is the tone of our voice, inflections, and sound. So my voice goes up. When I get excited, I elevate my voice. When I get sad, my voice goes down, and you can hear there's something wrong. So tone of voice. 55% is body language. You can very quickly, when you walk into a pub, you can see which of the people at the bar are looking for a little bit more than conversation. Read the body language. And guys, listen to your gut, because your body reacts to the language they are seeing on the other side. So make sure when you are engaged in interpersonal communication that you obtain the pure version and you take it in context. So now that we have the foundation of communication and why we communicate and how we communicate and what barriers there are to our communication, let us look at the 9 steps of interviewing. This is very important. You must know these 9 steps, and you must know how they flow one after the other. So here's your 9 steps. Your first step is preparation. In terms of what you are doing, before you talk to Sally, before you talk to Mary, before you talk to John, doesn't matter who you talk to, before you engage in a conversation, you do your preparation. I'm not talking about the initial conversation. I'm talking about you are now going to interview Sally. Sally was a witness. She saw Mary steal the laptop or whatever the case might be. So now you prepare. You find out who is Sally. How long has Sally been working at the company? How old is Sally? Is Sally married? Does Sally have children? What's going on Sally's Facebook page? What goes on Sally's Instagram or her Twitter feed? And you read up and you study the person that you are going to talk to so that you can know what makes Sally tick. Now you've done your preparation, you know the facts of the case, you know the background information, you know the policy that you are investigating under, or even the legislation. You know the elements of the crime that you have to prove. And this is where you now prepare for the actual interview. You send the invite to Sally. She will meet you in the boardroom on the Monday morning, let's say at 10 o'clock. And you come there and you're Sally at the door and you greet her, very friendly, always professional, self-confidence, because this encourages the person to be truthful and to be honest and to be open. You will only be able to do this if you practice. Remember, it's an unnatural situation. She's unsure. Sometimes the investigator's a little bit unsure. And then you introduce yourself. Hi, I'm John. This is why I'm here. This is why we're going to have a chat. And then you start rapport building. And you chat with her and you tell her, yeah, awful weather we had this morning. Were you stuck in that traffic jam this morning? Shame. I hear that you've been with the company for 5 years. That's awesome. You must love working here. Something that's got nothing to do with the case. Talk about the soccer, talk about the weather, anything but the case. And this is your cliched conversation. This is where you remove the obstacles, you face the interviewee, you make eye contact, you nod your head, and you match facial expressions. In other words, you are building rapport. Then we go to the question side. Now you start with open-ended questions. So, Sally, tell me what happened when you got to work on Monday morning. It's always good to ask for a free narrative. Let the person talk. Tell me what happened. And then you listen. You must actually hear what this person is telling you. Now, if you are defensive in terms of your listening, if you have blind spots, I think I've mentioned blind spots on the module site. Sometimes we have cultural blind spots. Sometimes we have gender blind spots. Sometimes we have age blind spots. We are blind to prejudices or preconceived ideas we might have about people. For example, Mary might be a lady that's a little bit overweight. So I have a preconceived idea that people who are overweight are usually lazy and not very disciplined. Mary might have a thyroid problem. Mary might have be on cortisone treatment for an autoimmune disease. I cannot have preconceived ideas about Mary. I have to be aware of who I am and what my blind spots are. And this is where your emotional intelligence comes in. To know who you are, how you think, how you view. Now you're asking this person questions. Base these questions on the missing things that you want to know, because the more you speak, if you speak to Mary and Sally and John, the picture is going to become clearer and clearer. You must remember when you prepare, you're going to ask, okay, what do I want to know from Mary? Initially, Mary, in our conversation, just said this, and the next thing. Now she's giving me a narrative, but I wanted to know, okay, how do you know this? And how do you know that? It's important that those questions you think about before the time, and even if you can soundboard with somebody more experienced, that also helps. Now you go to verification. After the witness has answered all your questions, you've reviewed the information, now you reflect and you say, okay, you told me this. Did I understand you correctly? You used this word. Did I understand you correctly? Remember, sometimes things can get lost in translation. For a large majority of us, English is not our first language. Fortunately for me, it is. So I am incredibly comfortable in English. But for Mrs. van Niekerk, English is not her home language, and she will not be as comfortable. And she might use words that she thinks means one thing, and it actually means another. More especially when you are interviewing somebody and they are an indigenous Tswana or isiZulu or isiXhosa speaker. It's important to make sure that the terminology used is as you understand it. Once you verify that this is what the person says, you make your extra notes. Now you do the catch-all question. Okay, having gone through all this, what have I forgotten to ask you? What can you think of that you haven't told me yet? And then you can just quickly run through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, can you remember? How do you know it was a green jersey? Can you recall whether you saw he had brown shoes on? That type of thing. Things that the person might not have thought of. So it's also showing you the person that, you know what, I value your memory, I value your help. And then you do the statement. Once you've done the catch-all question, now you take the statement. And this can happen in one or two ways. Usually what happens is, let's say Mary is the complainant and her cell phone was stolen. A very good strategy is to have Mary go to the police station and open a case. You will obtain a copy of her statement because that's the OPV, the obtain the pure version. And you will also ask her to circulate her I number to her service provider as stolen. They will then block her phone. If Mary was being deceptive and her buddy stole, in inverted commas, her phone and her laptop so she can claim from the insurance, she was now in a catch-22 situation because now she has to block her own phone. And you're going to very quickly see if Mary doesn't block her phone, then that might be indications of deception. So always get the person to do the statement in their own words. You never translate, if I can use the word, the person's words into what you think the person says. That's akin to hearsay. You write as the person speaks. You write the narrative in the statement as the person speaks. Once you've done that, you do the departure. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Without you, this will not be, I would not be able to get as much information as I did. You be professional and always leave a door open that should I need to clarify anything, please may I contact you. You've been of great help, and I would really like to contact you again if I need to further clarify things. And then once you are done, then you reflect. Then you look back and say, okay, now that I've done this, what did I miss? What could I have done better? How can I improve? And this is usually nice when you have a mentor who can reflect and say, okay, you did it this way, think about doing it that way. And this is why when we do research, we have pilot interviews where we practice these things. In the pilot interview, it's okay to make a mistake, because then when you're doing the interview proper, this will not necessarily happen. Okay, but now, what if Mary is not as truthful as you think she is? Is it really, really possible to detect deception? Is it really possible to be a human lie detector? I want to answer this one of two ways. But let's pause for a moment. You will remember quite a couple of years ago, Bill Clinton. Now, Bill Clinton had a romantic connection with Monica Lewinsky, and he was interviewed, and his words were, he was asked about his relationship with Monica Lewinsky, and he said, I have not had sexual relations with that woman. Now, I want to emphasize, human beings are social. We like interacting. And if you really know what to listen for, you will hear what people really want to tell you. Interaction with each other is part of who we are, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. No man is an island. No introvert can be on their own forever. Some or another time, they want to connect with somebody. Human beings are definitely selfish by nature. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy, the first one is self-preservation. I look out for number one, numero uno. I look out for me, myself, and I. And in terms of life, there are rules and ethics that frame how we conduct ourselves. For example, rules and ethics say that I may not go to work in my pajamas. However, when I work at home and it's cold, sometimes it's okay to work in my pajamas, but I won't go to work in my pajamas. You see where I'm coming from. So society expects of us to act in certain ways. And sometimes your instinct will determine your behavior. If you are caught off guard or you are feeling uncomfortable, you go back to your default settings, and this leaves signs and signals. So you're going to cover up and you're going to lie and deceive only for so long. But the moment you are put in an uncomfortable position, your default setting is going to kick in. Now, this is where the good investigator needs to be a good observer in terms of verbal and non-verbal communication. Remember those three aspects? In terms of the 7% is words, 38% is tone of voice, and 55% is body language. This is where it comes in. But you can only analyze the person's behavior if you have determined the baseline. In other words, if you have established rapport, and remember that it may be deviation from the baseline, may indicate deception. It doesn't mean the person's lying. The person sits with their arms across their chest, doesn't mean they're lying. It could be that they are cold. It could be that they are a little bit uncomfortable. It's normal to feel a little bit of discomfort. But how do we detect deception? How do we hone in on deception? So your study guide will take you through 3 steps. And you would have heard these steps before. But what I want to encourage you is go through the next couple of days and listen to what people say. Listen to what people don't say. And when you become an investigator, sometimes you're going to have to bracket yourself as regards your family, your children, your spouse, your parents, your siblings. Because once you have a trained ear to detect deception, you're going to realize how often people tend to deviate from the truth, how they tend to in Afrikaans we call dik aan, how they tend to exaggerate a little bit. And it's inherent in every person to want to tell the truth. You just must ask the right questions. Where does this begin? It begins with building the rapport. You do not interview, you do not interrogate, you do not do anything until you've built rapport and you've established a foundation of trust. As I said repeatedly, an interview is an unnatural setting. It's only normal the person is going to be nervous. Only normal there's going to be a bit of anxiety. So you build rapport and you establish a baseline that the person becomes a little bit more comfortable with you there. And while you're establishing rapport, this is where you determine the norm. You determine, how does this person breathe? How does Bernadine work with her hands? What does she do with her hair? How does she rub her eyes? If she wears spectacles, what does she do with her spectacles? What are her feet doing? What are her legs doing? Vitally important, so that you can see what my normal body language is. Because once you're out of the rapport stage and we get to there where the tire hits the road, yeah, I must start asking you questions now, but listen, fact is, you arrived at work at 10 o'clock and not at 8 o'clock. We know that your card was swiped at 8 o'clock. We have your cell record that shows your cell phone pinged at the tower closest to your house at 9:30, which means that you were still at home. And the cell phone pinged the tower at the Makelmere campus. So Bernadine, you reported late on Monday morning. And we know somebody, you had a colleague swipe your card for you. And this is where the difficult questions then start coming in. Remember, you gathered the facts. You gathered the facts from Sarah and Mary and John, and now you confront with the facts. And the moment you start asking these questions, this is when the body language should change. Now, usually what happens is a person's head, the head movement, check the head movement. The breathing may also change. The person's breathing becomes shallow because you have this fight or flight. So the adrenaline rushes to the vital organs. The blood usually is pulled to the vital organs to protect the vital organs, which immediately increases your breathing. Some people almost go into a catatonic state where they almost freeze. This is that fight or flight that is trying to kick in. Some people would say, no, I did not. I definitely did not provide too much information. No, John was there. John saw me. I was at the coffee shop with my Sunday school teacher. I've known her since 3 years old, and I mean, she will be able to tell you that I would never do such a thing like it. Too much information, person touching or covering their mouths. So these are all clusters of actions that you look for. Never, ever, never take just one of these and say, okay, this person is lying. Remember, a cluster of these things together, depending on what the baseline is, may indicate deception. It's up to you to prove the deception. The caveat, you never question somebody who's under the influence of alcohol or drugs. It's very, very important because you are outside the normal parameters then in any event. So when we get to the interrogation part, we've interviewed Mary now. We've got the baseline. We've gone through the 9 steps of the interview. Mary's given us her narrative. And now I realize when I talk to John and I talk to Sally, Mary might be lying. There's things Mary might be hiding. Mary's husband recently lost his job shortly after she bought this new cell phone and this new laptop. And that's why Mary now wants to claim from the insurance because she's sitting with financial difficulties. Now I'm going to invite Mary in for a follow-up. And what do? You start at the beginning. It's so important that we realize that creating that baseline, you and Mary had that connection, and now you bring Mary in again, and this is where you bring Mary in. Hi Mary, thank you for coming. Self-confident, professional. Mary, we had a conversation last week, and some of the things are not adding up. We've established rapport, we've chatted. And now I start telling Mary, you were supposed to cancel you were supposed to block your phone with your service provider. You haven't. Can you tell me why? Can you explain to me? And it's so important that in this process of chatting with Mary, you talk to Mary about her rights. Now, you are not a police officer. You are not obliged by law to say, okay, listen, Mary, I think that you are pulling a fast one. You want to pull the wool over Ousurance's eyes and you want to claim. So I definitely think that you are guilty. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And you get confrontational. No, you be calm. You have the choice as a corporate investigator whether to inform the person of their rights, and to do this as soon as possible after you've established rapport, and to do it in a calm, normal voice. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to be confrontational. You just say, Mary, you know what, in your interest to protect your rights, I'm going to inform you of your rights. At the end of the day, it might not even be necessary. We might get to a stage where we realize, okay, we had the wrong person in our sights, but you know what, to protect you, I'm going to tell you that you have the right to remain silent. If you don't remain silent, if you choose to talk to me, I'm going to jot down, or we have audio and video recording. We're going to record you and whatever you say. And this may be used as evidence in court against you if it turns out that you have lied to us or misled us. You don't have to confess, you don't have to admit, but if you do, we're going to take it down. You also have the right to an attorney. You can be represented by an attorney. Do you understand these rights as I've explained to them? And this is where Mary tells you, I understand my rights, I don't want to talk to you, I want a lawyer. And you have an option. Sometimes you can say, okay, Mary, here's my phone, you can call your lawyer while we wait for your lawyer. I just want to carry on chatting. Nothing prevents you from chatting with Mary. She's been informed of her rights. I'm not going to get on Mary's chest and force her to answer me. No. I'm going to continue talking with her. It's up to Mary whether she wants to talk to me or not. It's up to Mary whether she wants to answer me or not. It's important to remember that there are different interrogation techniques, different confrontational styles. You must find what works for you. You must find whatever method your company uses. It's important that you hone your skill in that. You must always have a backup plan. If this type of questioning doesn't work, what other type of questioning can you use? Always present the facts. This is what we do know. And I mean, if you looked at her social media, if you looked at her banking records, if you looked at her cell phone, she will realize, oh, these people know. And sometimes she says, okay, you know what? I can't handle this anymore. I'm not a normal person that lies. This is what happened. This is what I did. And then she comes out and she offloads, because this is why people sometimes confess, because that burden on the psyche is so heavy that, you know, I've got to tell somebody, okay, you know what, I did it. And it just that release of, oh, I got this off my chest. Sometimes she says, okay, you know what, I did it. I did what you think I did. And then she wants to tell you, she wants you to tell her, what is it you think she did? So she can hear, okay, what do you have against me? You know about the cell phone, but you don't know about the 20 laptops last year type of thing. Combination of paranoia and curiosity. And then somebody's willing to understand. Mary, you know what, I can understand. My brother lost his job due to COVID as well. I understand when things get rough. I understand it's a problem to put food on the table. I really understand what you were going through. And then you give her a way out to say, you know what, and I'm sure the court will understand. I'm sure management will understand. Don't lie to her. Don't create a false impression. Don't threaten her. Don't lose your temper. Don't swear. But be humane. Remember, in South Africa, we have the principle of innocent until proven guilty. So Mary is innocent until I can prove that she is no longer innocent. So this is basically the steps of an interrogation. As I said previously, very seldom do they do interrogations in the corporate environment. It's more a confrontational type of interview. So now that we've done that, remember the OPV, the obtain a pure version. You've done with your interview, you've done with your interrogation. Let's take a look at basic statement analysis, especially if Mary has now gone and reported her cell phone at the police station is stolen, and Mary brings you a copy of her statement. So basic statement analysis is that, guys, it's a skill, it's an art, it's not something that you can just learn by quickly reading a couple of things. It's something that you must practice, and it's a science. So this is where you analyze the words of the deponent. Who is the deponent? It is the person who makes the statement. You analyze the words independent of the facts of the case to detect possible deception. A statement analysis has no evidential value, but it does assist you to search for the truth. It gives you a clue in which direction to go. When Alice landed in the rabbit hole and she got to the bottom and she got to Wonderland, and she found the rabbit, and she said to the rabbit, which path must I take, left or right? And he said to her, where do you want to go? And she says, I don't know. He says, well, then it doesn't matter. You can take either. Now you want to search for the truth, so you must choose the crumbs that are lying in the path of the OPV to see which way are you going to go to find the truth. So solving a crime is like building a puzzle. You can only fit in the pieces of the puzzle that fit. So be careful of that prejudgment to say, make up your mind, you know what, I know Mary's guilty. I know what happened. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, it was John who stole the cell phone. So be careful of prejudging, be careful of a hard set hypothesis, have a basic hypothesis, and then you watch how the evidence leads you. Always before the interrogation is done, remember, once you've done your interview, you took Mary's statement, and you have a statement. It was non-confrontational, it was open and friendly, she did it at the police station. Now you take her statement and you analyze. You analyze what is going on, you look for deviation, and where's the possible deception. And in terms of the study guide, we give you 4 elements to look at. The first one is the use of pronouns and verbs. Oof, I know it's not English. I didn't particularly enjoy English at school, but bear with me a little bit. Use of extraneous information, that's too much information, like too much makeup, this is too much information. Lack of conviction, guys, I'm telling you, I didn't do this. I really didn't do this. It's not something I would do. You're not convinced. And then proportion of the statement. So let's first of all look at the parts of speech. Personal pronouns include pronouns such as I, me, you, she, we, he, they, and it. Truthful witnesses usually use the I pronoun. This is an indication of communication in the first person, singular form. I did this, I did that, I did the next thing. If this changed, for example, I was walking and then we arrived at the shop. If I becomes we, there's been a change in my reality. I've been joined by somebody. I indicates personal involvement only of me, whereas we indicates involvement of myself with another person, we, us. When they becomes we, a change in reality has happened. They indicates more than one person, but I am not involved because I'm not part of the we. I'm not part of the they and the them. They were at the other side of the table. I saw them doing this, but then we left. So what happened between the they and the them and now the we? We indicates I am personally involved, but together with somebody else. So it's important to look at these pronouns. So let's take a look at the first example. This is in your study guide, so you can go and look at it. I got up this morning, took a shower, and got dressed. I then drove to the shop in the mall where I had breakfast. After I had breakfast, I drove to the driving range where I hit some balls. Spoke to a man who hangs around the clubhouse. Spoke to him for a few more minutes. I finished and drove back home. Something happened between the time I finished hitting some balls and when I finished and drove back home. Something happened there. I must pursue that. I must go and look at spoke to a man. Did I speak to the man? Which man? Hanging around the clubhouse? So immediately there's a question mark there because I is not there anymore. So the second example is about how I would speak about a possession. I love my car and I looked after it. Loved my car, looked after it, past tense. I parked my car outside in the parking area at around 2100 and went inside to watch a movie at the theatre. When I returned to where I parked the car, I noticed that it was missing. I don't know what happened to the car. There immediately a change in reality has happened. It was moved from my car to the car and it. So it's not my car anymore. I have distanced myself from the car. Now, sometimes what happens in a situation like this, and this I picked up in my own statement, I was a victim of a smash and grab in which my handbag was stolen. And I could, once I'd read through my statement, I picked up the moment where the handbag was gone, it became the handbag and no longer my handbag because it wasn't physically in my possession anymore. So look at it also in that context. But it's not only just one thing. You will look at a cluster of things in the statement. The next example is verbs. Verbs form a very, very important part of speech. They express actions in the past, present, and future. For example, the norm is in the past tense, that when we describe an incident, it happened in the past tense. So we will talk in the past tense. So let's look at an example of possible deception here where the tenses differ. It happened on Friday night. I stopped at the gate and unlocked it. I stopped in front of my garage and got out of the car. A man runs from the shadows and sticks a gun into my face. So immediately what I also pick up there is I got out of the car. Why isn't I got out of my car? A man runs from the shadow, present tense, and sticks a gun in my face, present tense. Something is odd here. Something is not adding up here. So immediately this must tell you, yes, possibly something here that you must go and investigate a little bit further. It could indicate deception. It just could mean that I didn't really get home at 9 o'clock, or I didn't really go watch a movie. I was perhaps somewhere else. And this is what the person is being deceptive about. Okay, so the extraneous information, that irrelevant information, usually some people would talk too much and they will give too much information in terms of what they are discussing, so that they want to create the impression that I'm telling you everything, I'm telling you a lot of information, but I'm actually telling you nothing. It happened on Friday night. I stopped at the gate and unlocked it. I stopped in front of my garage and got out of the car. I'm a person who is very observant of my surroundings and careful when I drive into my premises. See the my, but it was the car. I was a police official for a number of years. A man runs from the shadows and sticks a gun into my face. Now, remember I told you that's inherent in a person to want to tell the truth. If you know what you're looking for, you're going to see that this person is being deceptive, because got out of the car, but it's I'm a person, I drive into my premises, past tense, and then a man runs from the shadow and sticks a gun into my face. So in other words, know what to look for. And then the last, but not almost the last one, is that's one of not being very convincing. You know what, to the best of my ability. It happened on Friday night. It was a warm evening with a spatter of rain. Irrelevant information. I stopped at the gate and unlocked it. I stopped in front of my garage and got out of the car. Why is it my garage, but the car is not there? A man runs from the shadows and sticks what I believe to be a gun in my face. Oh, my hat. Is it a gun or is it not? To the best of my knowledge, he was tall. He was a tall, well-built man. Something is terribly wrong with this statement. This person is deceiving, is being deceptive. Know what to look for. And then last but not least is the proportion of your statement. So usually your statement is divided. I'm talking about the body. I'm not talking about the preamble or the oath section. I'm talking about the actual substance of the statement. You have the first part, the second part, and the third part. The first part is this covers the events before the incident, places the events into context. And this covers roughly about a third of the total statement. The second part is the actual incident, also a third. And the third part is what happens after the incident, the emotions and what did I do and how did I react, also a third of the statement. And I think, okay, yes, I wanted to just explain this to you. In terms of evidence, we've spoken a little bit about evidence. The evidence that you take to court, the litmus test is, how was this evidence gathered? Now, there's a difference between objective evidence and subjective evidence. The best evidence is objective evidence. In other words, objective is when you stand outside looking in, and subjective is if it's tainted by personal views. So in other words, there's no evidence backing up that this is so. So objective evidence, I have a terrible pain in my back. Let me look. Oh dear, you've got a knife in your back. Subjective evidence, I saw Mary steal the laptop, but there is no hard evidence that she stole the laptop. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I stole the laptop. So you hear what I'm saying in terms of the type of evidence you look for. Okay, and I am all petered out. I thank you very much for your attention. Let us take a look if there are some questions. Okay, Teresa, are you still with me?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do we have questions in the chat box?
No, there's nothing yet.
Okay, all right. Everybody, I want to invite you, please, if you have questions, if you don't feel that you can share them on the microphone, let me just see if I can unmute everybody or give you an option to be able to mute yourself, unmute yourself. Okay, I'm going to give mics to attendees. And then what you do is you stick your hand, Teresa, you can see my screen, hey? You can just raise your hand, your hand here. And then I will, Mrs. van der Kerk, I will say, okay, Tebogu, or whoever the case might be, you have a question, and then we will take questions. If you don't want to, that's also okay. You can come to the conversation and you can type in your question, and we will then address your question there. Okay, this is a Telegram question. Okay, so while I have that question, let me just explain to you guys something quickly. In terms of assignment one is an online assignment. It is being done on the module site, but there where the marks are captured, you will not see it in your assessment space yet. So when you go to upload your assignments, you will not see assignment one's mark yet because the mark has not been imported yet. So I haven't been given the go-ahead to link the two platforms. So the moment I get the go-ahead to link the platforms, we will import the marks, and then your marks will show on the primary site. I really want to encourage you guys. I'm not going to be laborious. It's already 20 to 8. I'm not going to be labor or drag out the evening. I really want to encourage you to tell your fellow students about the live class. The reason why we had the class at this time is because I took a poll, and the majority of the students said they want a class between 6 and 8 in the evening because it seems a lot of the students work. However, the next class will be in normal office hours to then give the other half of the students the opportunity to be able to attend in normal office hours. I want to reiterate, I'm going to share the link of the recording on the module site, but it will be a YouTube link, so you're going to access it on YouTube, and I will also share the PowerPoint presentation on the module site. Okay, Zoe, it's Daniel Goldman. I'm going to write his name in for you. Daniel Goldman. And emotional intelligence or EQ. If you Google it, EQ, emotional intelligence, and the guru is Daniel Goleman. You get other things like spiritual intelligence as well, but in terms of the setting where we are, emotional intelligence is probably one of the key skills that you can invest in. My pleasure, Zoe. Okay, guys, there are no further questions. Ladies and gentlemen, there are no further questions. So without further ado, I'm going to bid you good night. Have an awesome evening, and I hope that you found the interaction insightful. I'd love to hear from you. You can send me emails or on the Telegram group or even on the module site. Tell me what you liked, tell me what you didn't like, tell me what you want less of, and tell me what you want more of. Because at the end of the day, I need to be sure that when I speak to you, I'm meeting your needs as far as possible. Okay, signing off. I'm going to stop the recording and then we can say good night. Sleep well, and we'll chat again. Thanks, Mrs. Van Niekerk. Thank you for your assistance. I really appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Yes, as my eyes and ears behind the back.